I am with our state senator, Bruce Tarr. Hi, Senator. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you, Heather? A belated Happy Valentine's Day.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes, this is the day after Valentine's Day,
Yes,
President's Day, and happy both of those days to you.
yes, yes.
So I promised you that I promised you 2 weeks in a row that I would allow you time to talk about rules. And I know a lot of decisions were made last week in the Senate about rules and revisions. Do you want to start with that?
So I appreciate the chance, and I promise I'll be brief because rules aren't the most exciting thing that we ever talk about, but they're very important because rules create the infrastructure by which we operate and by which folks' ideas get considered and by which matters are transacted in the legislature. So they are important. And this year we have 3 sets of rules to think about because of the pandemic. We have a special set of temporary emergency rules, and those are the rules by which we are voting remotely, for instance, and not coming into the chamber. And then we have joint rules, which are the rules that govern the House and the Senate. And then we have Senate rules. And so with regard to the joint rules, the Senate creates its own proposal, the House creates its proposal, and then we negotiate a resolution between those different versions. And with regard to the Senate rules, those are solely the province of the Senate. And so there were approximately 70 amendments that were filed in all 3 of those categories. And so there was a very vigorous debate that took place this past Thursday. And from my perspective, the rules debate was about trying to do really 3 things. Number 1, providing folks with more notice of what was going to happen. Number 2, providing folks, including legislators, with more ability to read and analyze the things that we were going to make decisions on. And third, trying to create as much transparency as possible in terms of accessibility to the public. And one of the things about the pandemic era, I believe, Heather, is that it really has heightened folks' interest in government. And I want to be able to give people the opportunity to engage and to know what's happening on a greater basis than we already do. So the temporary rules were adopted in the Senate, and the Senate rules were adopted. We also adopted a set of joint rules, but again, we have to reconcile those with what the House may propose, and they haven't really had that debate yet. But I think we did certainly move the bar on this issue. Now, I will tell you that I'm disappointed we didn't get everything that we wanted. One of the things that I think we should have done is change the rules so that every member would have to agree for the Senate to go past midnight. We saw some sessions over the past session where we had very important substantive matters that were being considered at 3 and 4 a.m., spending billions of dollars of taxpayer money, and also making major changes to public policy. And it seems to me that if there's an emergency and we have to go that late, that's fine. But if there isn't, the reasonable thing to do would be adjourn and come back the following day. And that's not just something that's in the best interest of legislators. My argument on the floor was it's also in the best interest of the public because most people don't have the luxury of being able to be up at 3 or 4 in the morning to see what we're doing and to tell us what they think about it. And so that's one where I didn't prevail. The rule remains it takes a 2/3 vote to go past midnight, but I'll try again. But a couple of things that I think were successful and I think will help us. Number 1, I amended the rules to say that whenever we spend more than $10,000 from our legislative accounts, that should go on the state's open check website. We require every state agency to tell us how they're spending our taxpayer money, and I believe the legislature should do the same thing. In addition to that, I partnered with Senator DeZoglio from Methuen to get a change in the rules to make sure that informal sessions are broadcast on live stream the same way that formal sessions are. Because during the time of the pandemic, we've seen a lot of important things transacted in informal sessions because they needed to be. But it doesn't mean that folks shouldn't have the ability to see them in just the same way. And we are doing a lot of that live streaming now, but now the rules will reflect that. And so folks will be able to rely on getting a live stream. So that's a little bit about the rules. As you could probably imagine, Heather, I could talk a very long time about this, but I won't, except to say that we made a push for more transparency and accountability and notice and the opportunity to read things. We won some and we lost some, but we did move the needle, and I think that's important.
Well, just to finish this up, tell us a little bit more about the Open Check website.
So we have the comptroller of the Commonwealth has something called the Open Checkbook, and state purchases are put on that website so that everyone can review them. But legislative purchases were not put on that website. And my belief is that if we as a legislature are trying to get more accountability and transparency, then we shouldn't be exempt from that same requirement, so that you can go and see what we're spending money on the same way that you can with every other state agency.
And I assume that's accessible through mass.gov?
It is.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for trying to increase transparency for all of us in government, all of you in government and us citizens. That's great. And
You're welcome. Nice. And we'll continue to push. I promise you that.
Okay, great. So you also wanted to talk about the bill filing deadline coming up, right?
Yeah. So this coming Friday is one of the most important deadlines in the entire legislative calendar for the 2 years of this session. And that is the time by which bills have to be filed if they're going to be filed in a timely way. And I have to make sure to remind folks that we as legislators can file bills at any time during the session. But the way the rules work is if we file them by the deadline, that means they must get a public hearing and they must be considered. If we file them after the deadline, then the House and the Senate have to vote to admit them, which oftentimes happens, but there isn't a guarantee. And so every legislator right now, all 200, are thinking about things they want to consider coming up over the next 2 years in the legislative session. And at the close of business on Friday at 5 o'clock, we will see thousands of bills filed. My estimate is it'll be somewhere between 4,000 to 6,000 pieces of legislation will get filed by members of the House and the Senate. And they'll cover a whole range of issues. For me, the focus right now is on rebuilding the economy, revitalizing our institutions, and making sure that we protect public health. And those are very large subjects, and they're the ones that I'm trying to focus on. Now, I certainly will file bills on other subjects, but those are the things that I think we need as a legislature and as a state government to be spending a considerable amount of our time on.
So just tell us a little bit what revisiting institutions means.
So we've got to revitalize our institutions. And what I mean by that is we have a lot of public institutions that have suffered, whether they be libraries or food banks or other kinds of things that we are used to dealing with in our lives. And we still are, but we're going to need to revitalize them. We're going to need to make sure that going forward, they have strength, because a lot of them have drained their resources. They've been trying to triage and patch things together to keep moving, and they've been doing an outstanding job of it. But I think we need to think about moving forward how we're going to revitalize them. And interestingly enough, coterminously with the rules debate, the Senate president did announce a committee of the Senate that's going to look at revisioning Massachusetts after the pandemic. And so as a Republican caucus, our agenda coincides with that one very well. And so it's an early sign that I think you'll see a fair amount of consensus on at least what we should be focusing on. Now, there's room certainly for disagreement about substance, but I think we're all coming together, and that's very good, around the things that we need to do, or at least the subjects that we need to consider.
Well, thank you for all this. I have one last question for you, and it's a very local one. Our town of Rockport has had a really difficult time recently. The Board of Selectmen last week had to make a really difficult decision. I think it's fair to say that everyone was saddened by the whole situation. Do you want to comment on such a hard situation in a little town?
So I will say that I'm in the ranks of the people who are saddened because Rockport has always been a close-knit community and always had the ability for folks to join together and work together. The fire department has been a prime example of that, where you have volunteers working at all hours of the day and night and making sacrifice to be trained and to be ready to be able to respond, oftentimes at some of the most challenging times in someone's life, when they reach out for help. And the good part has been when someone arrives, it's a neighbor that more often than not, who is there to help you. That being said, obviously there has to be accountability and there has to be good management. So my hope is that the town will find a way to move forward, remembering the importance of its volunteer legacy and also remembering how important it is to have good management. So I am saddened about what I've seen. I think it's a very difficult thing for a town to be in this kind of situation. I've seen it before. And my hope is that folks will be able to find a way forward and to remember the importance of working together. And that's going to take some work. And I know folks are committed to that. And my hope is that it will happen as soon as possible. And I know that, I stand by as a resource, but local decisions need to be made by local officials and people in the community. But my hope is things will get better and improve as time goes by.
Well, thank you very much for all your wisdom and all your hard work. And we will talk to you again next week.
I look forward to it. I'll be able to tell you about some exciting bills we'll be filing. And thanks,
I can't
Heather.
wait. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.